don't know how many of you have read the piece that I printed. When I was 16, my wonderful father decided it would be a good idea to give me the family car and trade the flathead engine out of it to a race car driver who had built a motor for his racer, took it out once and ran it, and they disallowed it. It's too powerful, you can't have it on the track. And so he bought my engine and put that in my car. And that's the reason that I was hit by the train. Because if I'd been driving my car, I probably wouldn't be here. But I was driving the family car, my brother's Impala, 1959 Impala. And I was taking my mother to my sister's house so I could keep the car and take my girlfriend Kathy to the coast. So I was very excited. So early in the morning, 8 o'clock, driving along Lebanon, driving along the river, scenic route. Mom wanted to see what was going on. And we pulled up to there's a little shortcut to connect with Highway 20, a little gravel road. And so I took that and I stopped at the railroad track. And it's one of these railroad tracks, right? Double track. And so I listened, I looked both ways, nothing. Pulled up on the tracks, 35 miles an hour, 510 feet sideways down the railroad track. And I had stopped about 15 minutes before and put my seatbelt on. I had never worn a seatbelt in my life. And this car had seatbelts. So I put one on and I stopped and I told Mom to put her seatbelt on. She had a hiatal hernia, so she didn't want to wear the seatbelt. And so I still don't know what would have happened if she had her seatbelt on. But I know what happened when I had my seatbelt on, because the coupler came into the car, in through the door, pushed my legs down, and I was in between the coupler knob and the area there. That's where I was. And it happened that fast, and I was gone. I was immediately ejected from me and went to a place that you can't describe. You know, you can paint about it and you can think about it, but you can't, there's no way to. I always tell people when people talk about near-death experiences, it's like, oh, I saw God, I did this, I met my aunt, and blah, blah, blah. When you go out, you come back with what you took with you. If you're a hyper-Christian, or if you're a Buddhist, if you're a whatever, that's the only language you know. And so when you come back and tell people about this experience, you're going to speak to them in the language that they can understand. And it's the only way to get the message through. But you can't really, you know, it's like describing air to someone. You know it exists, but you can't see it. And the experience, the emotional experience of having it was so dramatic. It was just, it's beyond anything that you can imagine. So when I came back, I was gone for a long time. I was dead for a long time, about 30 minutes. And I was pronounced at the scene, sheet over my head. They went and told my dad that I was dead. My mom made about 7 trips from the front seat to the back seat because she didn't have her seatbelt on, and the car was hitting the ties all the way down. None of the tires blew out. And my mom always said, Bill, you should use that as an advertisement for the tire shop. You know? Because none of those tires blew out. I said, thank God. And, yeah, exactly. And so they got her out of the car pretty quickly. It took them 45 minutes to get me out of the car. And they didn't know how. I pulled the sheet off my head. I came back. I watched everything from above, came back, and watched all these people running up and down the streets, and all these cars, and all these, hospital ambulances, and all this commotion, and the train, and was still on me and still running. And I opened my eyes, and it was white. What the hell? Reached up and pulled the sheet off my head and said, "Get this train off me." That was a piece of glass through my hand. And there was a little bit of hamburger here, but not much. And that was it. And I had one little scar. Now this is, when I was 16, I played rock and roll. So I had long hair, all right? And so I had a little nick right here, and it was bleeding pretty profusely. And so one of the medics says, "Well, we're gonna have to cut your hair." And I said, "No, you're not." "No, you're not." And they never did get to cut my hair. But KGAL radio in Lebanon immediately found out that I was dead. My dad was told by the state police that came to our tire shop and said, "Do you know a William Canaga, John William Canaga?" And Dad said, "Yeah, he's my son, lives in Los Angeles." And he says, "Well, there's a car out here with a boy in it who's dead, and the woman's on the way to the hospital." And Dad's name was John William Canaga, Bill Canaga. And so Dad got the news that I had died. And, excuse me, he got to the hospital, and as he walked in the door, the emergency room, I sat up on the gurney and said, "Dad."
Oh my God.
It's literally the only time I ever saw my dad cry. That was it. And but I was dead on the radio all day Saturday and into the night. Dad finally got so disgusted he drove out to the radio station and kicked the door and said, "God damn it, he's not dead." And so they called me at 11:30 at night in the hospital. And I talked, I didn't talk about the near death, but I talked about I'm still alive. And by the way, and so this is Saturday. Sunday, Monday night they released me. I was back in school on Tuesday on crutches with bandages, but still walking upright. And a lot of surprised people. There was a lot of dropping of books and yelling and fainting. I had 3 people faint. I walked around the corner and they went, boom. And Paul Brown, my high school science teacher, first period, Abrams, Boucher, Cantwell, pause. I finally said, "Hey, I'm still here." It's like, he says, "I saw you, but you were dead." And so the whole day went like that. Actually, a couple more days, because people would do, "Oh my God." So when I finally started thinking about what happened, about being in that state, and realizing that once you're there, you're always there. You never come back. You're always connected. It's like being attached to that other realm. And it changes the way you think about things, how you approach things. It changes you in so many ways. But being able to take some of that and put it into art was a real blessing. And I really appreciate these guys asking me to do it, because it really made me think about some of the pieces I'd done in the past and how they were about the near-death experience. Like this one, about coming back from the experience. And these about what I saw, what I imagined, and about going through the tunnel everybody talks about going through the tunnel. It's the only thing I can describe it as. I think whoever did, I'm not sure if Kubrick didn't have a near-death experience, because what was it, 2001? That rocket ride through that was very close to being in that state, because everything happens. And suddenly you're there, and everything in the world, and everything you've ever known, and everything you ever will know, and everyone who's ever lived, and everyone who ever will live is there with you. And it's just this, it's so dense. There's so much information. There's so much to know. And a 16-year-old. So when I came back and was put back in place and had to get along with everything, it changed my life in ways that I can't even imagine how much it changed me. My personality changed, my school habits changed, everything changed. And I became I was a smart kid. I wasn't brilliant, but I was pretty smart. And suddenly I knew everything. I just knew everything. I didn't ever open a book to go to school. I'd read because I wanted to. I'd never study. I'd just take the tests and get A's. It's like, it was just very strange. And one of the reasons that I think that it changed me more than I think it would is when I was ready to come back, I was weakened to the point where there was not much of me left. And I felt like I was braided with other entities to get more strength to be able to make the trip back. And when I came back, I was changed. And about a year later, my brother came back from France. It was his car. He came back from France, Air Force liaison to what do they call it? Parisian police force? Gendarmes, yeah. He was the liaison, the Air Force liaison. And he came and, gave me a big hug. Good to see you. Then he looked at me for a minute and stepped back and says, "You're not my brother." And I was like, oh, it scared me. And we never connected after that. He was convinced that it was not me, it was somebody else. And I never got that from mom or dad, but definitely from him. And kind of strange. And that was the first time. And coming back, one of the things when I came back, I saw everything. And so when I pulled the sheet off my head and told them to get the train off me, they didn't know how, because the coupler was in my lap still, and they couldn't jack the train up, right? And they couldn't back the train off because it would have rolled the car with it, right? And probably killed me or done a lot of damage. And so I said, get the tie-down chains off the Rose logging truck, tie the car to the railroad track, and back the train off. They're like, well, that might work. And so they went down and got the tie-down chains off the Rose logging truck, whose bed was up and the chains were available. They tied the car to the railroad track, backed the train off, and I'd never heard metal scream so much. When they backed that out, I still can hear that noise. And just my legs bowed back up, the coupler came off, the door sprang up, and my legs popped back to where they were supposed to be. And I started bleeding. I was bleeding a lot. And they got me out of the car. It took them about another 10 minutes to figure out how to get me out of the car. They got me out of the car, got me in the ambulance, and I was floating in and out of myself on the way to the hospital. I could feel myself drifting out and coming back. And when we got to the hospital, like I said, they put me on the gurney. Dad, I'm sorry about the... Shocked him just a little bit. It took me, like I said, till Tuesday. And they said I wouldn't walk for at least 2 months without leg, what do they call it, braces or something like that. Well, that night, I had to go to the bathroom. And I was pretty athletic and pretty tough kid. I worked in a tire shop from the time I was 9, so, you know, I was pretty strong. And so I got myself out of bed. I kept ringing the bell, nothing. No one came. I got so mad. I finally got out of bed and drugged myself across the floor to the bathroom. And I pulled myself up on the door, on the handle, and I got hold of the railing. And I walked around the hospital room on that railing, and finally I got out into the hallway, and I walked all the way around the hospital on that railing. My legs were like that. And by the time I got back, you know, and the nurses kept going, "You can't be out here, you can't do this." I'm like, leave me alone. And I got all the way back and got to my room, and the next morning I got up and I walked. Very wiggly, but walked. My knees were not in good shape. But I had to use crutches for about a week. But, you know, miracles. And so that was the first time. The second time.
You lost your story thread about the tie downs.
Oh, the tie downs?
Yes.
Oh, the Rose logging truck.
Yes.
The Rose logging truck was 300 feet on the other side of the train. And so there's no way I could possibly have seen it.
Oh, really?
Except I was up there. I watched the entire thing. And it was like being separated but seeing everything. That's what this one's about coming back. And all of my paintings since then have been from a perspective of up instead of this way. And I never really thought about it until I started doing that, and I went, that's why. It's because I see things from a different place. And so that's the one. That was the one. In 1994, I had always had heartburn. As a child, always had heartburn. And it was a no valve at the top of your stomach. It's fairly common. But it was really getting serious, and I was getting Barrett's syndrome. And one of my best friends and mentor, Frank Okada, who was the head of the painting department at the university, he died of that. He had Barrett's syndrome turned cancers. And so I got very animated about that, and the VA started feeding me what became Prilosec for 3 years. And I got to the point where I didn't have heartburn anymore, and my esophagus decided it's not a stomach anymore. And so they were able to do the surgery. Well, as one doctor put it, 3 hours into a 2-hour surgery, things started going bad. And they inflated me, put in the micro tools, and did the surgery. Well, I was very strong, and my thorax said, no, I don't want to be inflated. And so I collapsed, and it popcorned my lungs and stopped my heart. And I went quickly away, and I was still in the hospital, I was still on the table, and I was off and taking a very interesting trip, not as complex as the first one. But when I came back, it wasn't a serious sense of coming back. It was just like waking up from a dream, but you're already sleeping. It was very strange. And they got me started, they kick-started me, finished the surgery, and everything was fine. They gave me the little breathing pillow and put me in the recovery room. And I sat in the recovery room and breathed out and breathed in and breathed out and breathed in and breathed out and breathed in. And this went on for 6 hours. And I kept saying something's wrong, and they said, oh no, it's the surgery, you'll be fine. And all my vitals were still good. And then I listened to myself flatline and got up out of myself and watched them wheel me down the corridor very quickly and throw me onto a bed and put big needles up my back and draw the fluid off. They had nicked the pleura and punctured the bowel. And so I had an E. coli infection that collapsed my lungs. And I had nothing. And so I watched them do all this. And I watched them open me up. The doctor jumped up on me and put a scalpel in and cut me, and then put the rib spreaders in, put the tube in, took me on my side, did the same thing over here, and then another one, and that's when I came back. And I bent the bed rail down against the hospital bed. And women say you can't really remember pain when you have a baby. I remember this. And it's the most painful thing I've ever had in my life. And it was just beyond comprehension. So when I watched this whole thing, and then I flowed in and out a little bit, but I was settled. And so 3 months in the hospital, they had to finally take my lungs completely out and put me on a reoxygenation system, clean my lungs, and put me back together again. And so I'm 80% disabled. When I go to the VA for the 5-year checkup, it's usually a new doctor, and he hasn't really read the files that are this thick. You know, he just kind of goes, 80%. And I walk in like this. What's happening? And then I take my shirt off, and they go, okay, 80%. It's like, all right, we see. You know, it's like, all I have to do for Halloween is put the bolt through my neck. That's it. So there's much more to it. If anybody has any, detailed questions or anything, but it was the most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me, and the most terrible thing that's ever happened to me. But it changed me, and I wouldn't be the artist I am, the person I am. Impossible if that hadn't happened. So, answers, questions? Go ahead.
Can you talk about these figures?
Yes, this is, it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to put into words. But the feeling of having spirits, entities around you, right? And being part of it, right? So you're actually part of it instead of looking at it. And so they could be angels. That's the title of them. And I made 35 different ones. It's like, including one that's at Ghost Ranch. I went to Ghost Ranch and stood there and watched all the color, the hills around there, and was just like, oh my God. And so I went to the hotel room, got my plate, came back out to Ghost Ranch, and made a print there. And it's in the manager's office on the wall. So that was a nice trip.
Did you recognize different people?
No, because there's no seeing.
It was just a feeling?
There's a sense. You can't really see. You can know. It's like there's no there. You can't hear, you can't see, you can't taste, touch. You don't exist. You're a spirit. You're an entity. And you can't connect with anything on any kind of level that we can understand.
Did you recognize anyone in spirit that you might have been with family?
Not in a sense of recognizing,
Did you
but feeling that people that I knew were there, right? And go ahead.
Do you think that, how you floated up and you saw those chain things, and that was what saved you? Are you the only person you know who's had that happen to where them leaving their body is what actually saved them?
Not that I've never talked to anybody about it, but I'm sure it's happened.
An evolutionary thing people do.
I'm sure it's happened.
Survival thing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for sharing all that. Appreciate it. I was going to ask, oh shoot, I forgot. Sorry.
You're like me, you're getting old.
No, I can't remember.
I have a question. You
near-death experiences and how they changed you. Would you please pick one of the changes, how you are in the world differently, or something that goes with you actually every day? A change that is, that sets you...
I think my trust in intuition and my trust in not having fear, and I'm sure that saved my life in Vietnam because I had no fear. You know, what are you gonna do, kill me?
Yeah.
You know, and that was the thing in Vietnam. We always said, what are you gonna do, send me to Vietnam? And so, what are you gonna do, kill me? And I never was terrified or feared. And I have had exactly one panic attack in my life, and that was in Vietnam. And we had, does anybody know what a Bangalore torpedo is? It's a bamboo, and they put a charge in the bamboo, and then they push the bamboo through the wire, bamboo after bamboo after bamboo after bamboo, very low, very quietly, slow, and then it gets to where it wants to be, and then they pull the trigger and boom. And we had that happen. And the next night, I was on guard duty in a very bad place, Phu Bai, Vietnam, and we were constantly under attack. And I was on duty, and I saw someone, and I heard the noise, and I literally froze. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't do anything, and I just sat there. And it must have been, it felt like hours, and it was probably 5 minutes. And when I came out of it, it was like, oh my God. It was like being released. And I've never had another one. You know, it's a good thing.
Kind of move a little bit. The piece there in the back left about we all sang the same notes.
Mm-hmm.
Was there music?
Not as you would think of it. Not that you could hear, but that frequency, that vibration, that feeling of being a part of everything, you know, connected. That's what those two pieces are about. And the ones with the agate-looking ones, that's like the trip through the tunnel. And then this one's about coming back and leaving and being kind of sad about leaving because it was the most beautiful thing in the world, or out of the world, basically. Anybody else?
Yeah, the pieces, particularly the one about conflicting vibrations, the blue with the red, are you referring to physical matter as being vibrations?
It's the point between there and here. And it's that perfect harmony. And I love color, obviously. And I love color frequencies and figuring out which color is going to radiate with the other color and have interference. And your brain creates, if you look at that piece, you'll see a line in between the two. There's no line. You know, it's your brain saying there has to be a line here. And I love visual things like that. I use that a lot in my art. Go ahead.
Do you like know string theory at all? Like if you were
Oh, yeah.
thinking about that, it seems a lot like that.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah.
The connectedness.
Yeah, the little everything's vibrating in its own, you know?
Right.
I'm wondering how your experience of the other realm made your experience of Vietnam maybe different from other soldiers. It seems to me, as a person who's only ever been here, that it's about killing. It's about making people die. And if that was the world in which you find yourself physically, knowing what you knew since the thing, did this feel like it was just a game to do? Or how did you feel with it? How did that...
I've thought about that a few times, and it was impersonalized a bit, you know.
Or not?
A little bit. A little bit. I've been in situations where I've helped people not die, you know, and I've seen people die. And
What's that like? What's that like for you, being you?
I think that if I wasn't doing art and I wasn't happily married and having the life I think I would probably be working in a hospice place, because people that I've talked to that work in hospice centers, they always want to pick my brain, right? It's like, what happened? You know, how was it? And everybody who's died in front of me has died with a smile, you know, died peacefully, because it's that time. But when you're 16, it ain't time. And I was determined to come back, and I've been determined to stay alive for a long time. I'm 75, so.
So is that because you have such good relationships on this realm that you're determined to stay?
I think just because I don't necessarily want to go. I like it here. You know, I like doing art. I like my wife. I like my cat. You know, I mean, these things that hold you down. And if you,
Hold you in.
yeah, and a lot of people don't have that in their life. And that's what I feel bad about most of all. It breaks my heart to see people walking with nothing. They have no life. And you can't make them have a life. You know, you can give them money or whatever, but you can't make them connect. And it breaks my heart.
So on that the second time in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
when you stepped out, did you also have not just an observing awareness, but an awareness of the realm?
The third time I watched everything.
But
And the second time was gone back. And it was being there, but not with the intensity of the first one. I mean, I was gone for a long time the first time. And many of the doctors, I mean, they kept giving me tests, right? For, I think, about 3 months after I'd have to go back to the doctor and take a test, right? Cognition and, you know, seeing how my brain was working. And it seemed to work okay. I mean, got good grades, you know. And go ahead.
Yeah, I was interested about your brother not recognizing you in essence.
Yeah.
And has that ever resolved itself, or?
No, my mother had me when she was 46, and my youngest brother, who was Joe, was 13 years older than me. And so he passed 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, at 79. But he had gone through, like I said, he was in the military, and he was in a very severe wreck in Paris. A lorry fell on him going around one of the arcs, and he had he says, "I'll never forgive that son of a bitch." He says, "That was my favorite car." He had a 1956 Mercedes Gullwing, and his daughter was in the car and his wife was in the car, and the lorry fell on his side and missed them. It crushed his side and injured him pretty severely. And so he ended up on pain medication and got addicted. And this was 1963. And got addicted and stayed that way, and it affected him in so many ways. But he continued to march through the military. He ended up being a bird colonel in the Air Force. He was the head of nuclear security for the Western United States. That was his last job. And when he left, when they stopped giving him his medications, goodbye. He showed up at my door at about 2 o'clock in the morning and was in a complete state of oddness. And of course, he was my brother, you know. I let him in and talked to him a little while, and then I went, oh my God, something's going on here. And my other brother, John, who was a Los Angeles deputy sheriff, he drove up from Los Angeles and got Joe and took him back down to California and to Merced Air Force Base to the hospital there because he had lost his mind. He got on stage with Bucky Fuller in Seattle. He's known Bucky for years and years. He was at the university when they built the dome here. And so he knew Bucky, and they, you know, stayed in contact. But Bucky Fuller's up on stage in Washington talking. Joe comes up, walks up on the stage, and sits down in the chair. And what are you going to do, you know? Bucky says, oh, he's okay, you know. But he just lost his mind. He just lost it. And so when they pull into Merced Air Force Base, they pull up to the gate. My brother, Johnny, Los Angeles deputy sheriff, my brother Joe reaches in his pocket, gets his badge, and shows it to the guard and says, this man has absconded with me. I want him arrested. And so they took John out of the car. And John never really got over that. But Joe laughed so hard, oh my God, you know. He finally got help, and they got him back to normal, and he ended up marrying a French publisher that he'd met in Paris years before, and they lived on the coast. They bought a couple of places in Coos Bay area and Brookings, and he passed away in the military retirement home down there. But he was the last time I saw him, I had a one-person show at the Coos Art Museum, and suddenly this voice came out of, you know, he started talking to me about, or explaining this piece that I had painted, and he said, that looks like something you did when you were a kid. And it's like, oh my God, you know, I hadn't seen him in years, and that was the last time I saw him. Yeah, goes long ways. Anyway, anything else? Good.
Did you experience a life review?
Pardon me?
A life review? Did you experience a life review?
Yes.
You see your whole life go before you, you know, all your history.
Yeah, pretty much. And everything, it was like seeing everything.
Like stuff that hasn't happened yet also.
There was some of that, I'm sure, you know, but I don't dwell on that. I'd rather be surprised, you know.
I knew what you're talking about. I don't think he was putting it together, but when he's talked to me about it over the years, when he said everything all at once, that's when it occurred. But he also told me and left out that the first time he went through this, he had so many life experiences, you know, in there that the period in which he was doing that was the longest of the first one. And the second one, there wasn't as much accumulated, and it felt different because he'd already kind of relived it.
Been there, done that.
He already said there's no time, there's no edges, there's no senses. It's all just sort of a big blast rush of experience all at once.
And
Replay, or have any sense of going back over times in your life where you may be disappointed or hurt people?
not really,
No? Okay.
not really. I mean, that you carry with you all the time.
Yeah,
You know, that's something that it's always there.
yeah.
You know, that fleeting glimpse of something you did to hurt somebody's feelings or something, you know, 50 years ago, and you still feel bad about.
Yeah.
That's kind of, you know, that's always there, thankfully. And once in a while I try to liven things up a little bit. I have a beautiful studio above the house, and it's got a spiral staircase. Well, for my wife's birthday present, I went up the stairs with a glass in my hand and my hand on the center column instead of on the railing. And I got to the very top step and my foot slipped off and I went all the way to the bottom and smacked my head into the wall and bled. And we're very glad we didn't have carpet anymore. And so that was my wife's birthday present.
Did you see did you watch it fall? No, it woke me up. And he had a second fall that night. He got into bed and he got up to go to the bathroom and collapsed.
Boom.
Cracked his head on a door frame, and that's when he was unresponsive. And I called 911 and
Took 4 of them to get me out of there.
That was number 3?
No, that was, I didn't die on that one.
That was just to liven things up.
It's like,
much more stubborn since.
yes, I'm not going. Not going. But yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so with that, I mean, it sounds like at each time that you were determined to come back.
Yes.
And like, I'm just wondering if you have any sense of why you were granted that. Because I mean, I'm sure there's many, many people who die wrongfully. There's terrible things that happen that don't get that choice.
You know,
Any sense of why you were able to?
I've thought about that often, and I really can't identify a reason, but I know that since I've been me from the time I was 16, I've done so many things and affected so many things and been a part of so many people's lives. I think that's why,
Maybe they weren't ready for you. They're like, whoa, this one's like a little bit. We're not quite ready.
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
we'll take you later.
Let him mellow out first
No.
before you.
We'll take you later. But I've gotten to play music and traveled all over the world and had extraordinary experiences that most people don't get to have. And I think it's partly because I don't have any fear. Want to do something? Let's go do it. One of the best examples of that, when I was in Vietnam, I had a friend who was a captain in, well, he was Air Force, but he was Air America. And if anybody knows Air America, he was flying missions. And he called me up one day and says, he called my headquarters and said, "You want to take a few days off?" I said, "Sure." So I asked my boss, and he said, "Oh yeah, you can just go." He said, "I'll give you a week." I said, 7 days? He says, "All right." And so I went to the Da Nang airport, and he picked me up, and we went to Brisbane? Yeah, Brisbane. And then to Sri Lanka. And the Tamil rebels were doing their thing, and he had a whole bunch of guys with him, and I was just along for the ride. And so I got to Sri Lanka and checked into a little hotel in Colombo right along the water, a little 12-room unit, and it was extraordinary. The food was amazing, and when he came back and got me, we spent 2 days wandering around Colombo and not getting in trouble, not getting food poisoning, and then took me back. And it was just like, doesn't everybody do that? I was like, oh, that was fun. But I didn't, if I'd have been in another state of mind, I wouldn't have gone, because I'd have been afraid. But what are you gonna do? Shoot me?
When you have met other people that have had near-death experiences, can you sense that they've had it before you even find out?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I have met some people that have had very intense near-death experiences, and we immediately you know, connected. But that was, I think that was just meant to be, you know. And you meet the people in your life that you need, you know.
I started saying a minute ago, maybe around the concept of free will, but then, like, maybe you weren't done here yet.
Yeah,
You had other stuff that you were supposed to do.
yeah.
I wonder where that agenda comes from.
No, but that's definitely true. It's just not time.
Yeah.
And I was told by this very nutty woman in it was when I was getting ready to be drafted. I did not want to be drafted. I did not want to be drafted. My first wife and I would go to Los Angeles and change our address and then fly back to SIO and change our address back and forth about once a month. Because her sister married the Wood family and they had Silvertone color processing in Los Angeles. So they had all the kiosks and the, you know, perfect photo and studio color and all those places in Watts. And so we got to play. We were spoiled. And finally, we had the tire company. And so I changed the tires on all the cop cars in the county and the sheriff. And so finally, one of the sheriffs came out to the house and said, I'm sorry, I got to do this, and gave me the warrant for my appearance. You know, I had to appear and didn't have a choice. So I showed up. I abused myself for about 3 days with everything I could take possibly, and stayed awake and did bad things. And when I showed up to get drafted, I was not in a good state. I had long hair. I had an attitude. I was not going in. You can't take me. And the first guy, I had a little medal on my neck that this girl had made in Corvallis. It was a solid chain. There was no clip. And so, you girls take your goddamn jewelry off. And so I took it off my chest, hung it over my ear. It's not on my chest, right? And this little Marine guy comes up and says, I said take it off. And he pulled it and cut my ear. And I hit him and I sailed him over his desk. And I picked up his desk and I threw his desk at him. And so the 4 Marines that took me the rest of induction, they walked me very, you know, carefully, walked me through induction, got me through, and I was an ass the entire time. I was disruptive, I was disrespectful, I was horrible. And they took me to the psychiatrist's office. And I said, I got this one. And so I sat down in the chair, and only 2 Marines would fit. The other 2 had to sit outside. And it was an L-shaped office. And he's back here. I hear him doing stuff, shuffling paper. And he comes out, and as he comes out, I look up on the wall, and there's a picture of my brother. And I just kind of went, oh, this. And he was Korean American, and it was during the Korean War. And my brother, who was 6'3", 290 pounds, and his protector. And they went on shore leave together. Anybody that messed with him got a rope around the leg and dipped in the ocean off the back of a destroyer. And my brother was a very large and dangerous man. And so he sat and told me stories about my brother for half an hour. And it was the Los Angeles deputy sheriff guy. He played football for the Navy. And so he said, you'll do fine. And he got everybody else's paperwork and put me in charge. And that was the start of my military career. So I ended up being, you know, everything up to a drill sergeant. And then my last job in the military, in the official military, not the reserve, was operations sergeant for 5th Signal Command Europe-wide. So I had gone up the ladder quite nicely. And
There's quite the metanoia from you not wanting to have anything to do with
exactly,
or to go, like up there.
you adjust.
Especially drill sergeant.
Yeah. Oh, I was a good drill sergeant. I was a very good drill sergeant. I had the voice. You
It's so
know.
interesting to me, because you were exercising your free will with every intention to get the hell out of there.
Exactly.
You to get crazy, right?
Yep.
And then, boom, there's a picture of your brother.
Yep.
So there went your free will.
Okay, I'm back. You know, I give up.
Yeah, put that there. Good grief. Yeah.
Yeah, the little things in life come up and
Signposts,
yeah. Well, anything else?
What was your third? What was your third? Maybe.
Oh, that was when they popped me out. I listened to myself flatline and popped out and watched them wheel me down the corridor.
So when you were 16, and when they did that,
It was 94.
what was which one am I missing?
The E. coli infection of his lungs.
Oh, I thought that was the same.
It is.
Oh, it happens twice within a few days.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so the second part of that, did you, like, you went and they've been there
No.
since you were 16?
I was out,
Right. And what was that like?
but I was watching everything. I was here. And I watched them wheel me down the corridor, throw me on the bed, draw the needles up my back, and I told the doctor what I saw, which freaked them out, you know. And one of the nurses said, I've been through this before, you know, and the doctors had not. And they were like, and I was telling them what side of the bed they were standing on, you know, what kind of needle they put up my back. So,
So, and then a few hours later, again, couple days.
couple days.
So on those 2 times in the hospital, did you feel yourself in the other realm?
Oh yeah, first time, absolutely. Now, like I said, once you come back, you never come back. You're always there. Accessing it is like snapping your fingers.
Can you close your eyes now?
No, it's not about closing your eyes because you don't see anything.
But now can you?
Sure. Go ahead.
Do you believe people or entities in that other realm can access you here?
Maybe. You know,
Because you've been there before, or?
I think you're connected. You know, you're always singing the same note,
Yeah.
all right? You're always connected.
So at this age that we're all getting to, we have more and more of our friends and family dying.
Hmm.
Do you feel a connection to somebody gone every now and then?
Once in a while, someone will pop into my brain, and I wonder what they're doing, what's going on.
But you don't feel an absolute connection?
No. Mm-mm. Like Frank Okada was one of my mentors and a good friend and somebody I looked up to, and I had his wake basically at my gallery years ago. And I still have one of his pieces on the wall, and I look at it every day and think about Frank. And I've got pieces done by other artists that have passed that I connect to. And that's how I connect. You know?
On that note, it's All Souls Day today, which is the remembrance of people that have passed.
Yes.
And I come from Europe, and actually it's my birthday too.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, people go to other people's graves, relatives, and put candles and reconnect and.
Sure.
And on that note, we have something else in program, but I would love to look at your artwork.
Go ahead.
And we're late, so can I jump in?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
I want to say,